Hello everyone, a very good afternoon to all of you. I am Priyanshi welcoming you all on behalf of Solo Quarter and First Free Group to the first day of CNI Energy Show 2022 Southeast Asia. Hope you had a good time in networking with your peers today. Now it's time to start with our conference, but before that, I take the opportunity to thank our sponsors, Platinum Partner Goodby, for extending their immense support to organize this event. I request my team to please play the sponsor video. Thank you so much, team, for playing the sponsor video. Now, let me quickly take you through today's agenda. We will be having a presentation and a panel discussion that will be focused on innovative solar power procurement models in the CNI market. So, without any delay, let's begin with our first session. This session will be starting with a techno commercial presentation by Mr. Richard Mercury from Goodby. Welcome on the screen, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Priyanis. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear
Yeah,
you.
yeah. So thank you very much. Yeah, I'm Richard from Goodwe, Indonesia. Actually, I'm the only one who representative Goodwe for Indonesia market. So let's start with the presentation. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir, we can see your screen.
Yeah,
Can you put it in the presentation? Yeah, it's perfect. Please continue.
yeah. This one is the Goodwe for CNI solution. So maybe we start. This is a 400 volt AC system solution from Goodwe, which is the load consumption is the priority and the excess solar power is fit into grid. So we have the product is a SMT 25 under 60 kilowatt. The MT is a 50 until 80, and then the HT with the high voltage one is 75 until 120 kilowatt. Basically, it's used for hospital, school, office, and factory building. And then the next one is the AC. This is a low voltage product. Basically, it's used only for South America or Belgium. It's not applicable in Indonesia. We have the product is 12 until 35, and then the LV MT medium voltage is 30 until 50, and then the high voltage is 73 kilowatt. And then this is the high voltage system. So there's a no load consumption in the system. All is fed into the grid. The optional product is 70 until 80, and then the high voltage is 100 and 136 kilowatt. And then for the commercial industrial, we have 73 until 100, 136 kilowatt with 12 mppt. And then the latest is the SMT product, which we know nowadays in the market is 100 kV for CNI is shortage. So good we develop the 50 and 60 kilowatt with 6 mppt. This is the new product from CNI. And then also the with the evolution of PV module, as we know, introduced in the early 2012 is a 156 millimeter, and then the solar size is developed until now. The current is 182 and 210 millimeter, and our product is suitable and applicable with Trina with the Vertex model 670 with largest short circuit current is 18.62, and then another brand also like Canadian Longi GA we also applicable. And then the we want to mention at here is the maximum DC input is 15 ampere. So you will get more yield, yeah, more yield in each string, which has an input current of 30. And then we also have Goodwill product also come with the export power solution. So if you don't want to fit into the grid, you just can buy the GM 3000C with three current transformer. It comes with Goodwill accessories. And then for multiple inverter, you also can install the SEC 1000 with three CT. And then we also have a PV genset solution. Yeah, nowadays I'm creating a new project actually in Indonesia because the PLN is yeah a little bit strict with the on grid. So we have also this solution with the compatible inverter is SMT, MTHT, up to 16 pieces genset. Also, the compatibility for the controller is right now is only two. The first one is Encombi and the second one is Dave. Other from these two, we don't have any news. So this one is the compatibility. And then this one is the off-grid PV genset shifting solution, which means the genset and the PV can do the shifting, and then the configuration can be used with our application SolarGo. This is the good we develop application. And then this is the other typical scenario. We also have the 225 and 250 kilowatt high voltage with 1500 volt DC with less string cable, less AC junction box, of course less labor needed. And then our product also with HT series, if you have a Y branch connector, what Y branch connector should be connected to even string. So the odd string is not applicable, only even, and then the string level monitoring will be disabled. And then the saving non-neutral cable connection, and then our material is a copper AC connector. Maximum support is 240 millimeter AC cable size for high voltage. And then this is the adapt to multiple environment. For example, the rooftop come with 12 MPPT, and then the derating is a 50 degree. The efficiency will be derating after 50 degree. And then the third one is we have a C5 protection level, which is it applicable in saline area. And then we have a SPD1 and DC side. This is also optional. And then we have a good heat dissipation performance, which I said before. HT series is derating from 45, and SMT and MT series is a high voltage inverter from 50 degree Celsius. It will the efficiency will be low. And then we also have a C5 anti-corrosion protection, which we use the material inside is the powder coating from renewable. And then this one is the AFCI 3.0 quick and precise. So the trip time is less than 2.5 seconds. This function is optional. And then the most important is with the other inverter is the PID recovery box is outside. But in GoodWe inverter, our brand is or our material is already built in. So internal PID repair board. So it makes you easy for installation. And then the LCD or LED, I think this one is just the same, yeah, nowadays with other brand of inverter. So multiple MPPT technology, it will bring you more power generation. So in one megawatt, 100 MPPT versus 16 MPPT. So maybe the traditional string solution is 1 until 3 MPPT per inverter. But smart PV solution like GoodWe, we have until 10 MPPT per inverter. So this is the effective to settle the problem like hotspot, dust, temperature, and string mismatch, and will bring you more yields for your customer. And then the second one is the DC oversize. Maybe in other inverter is the 30%, right? Like this is 1.3. In GoodWe, we can do the DC oversize is 50% with 10% AC overload. And then is a maximum 1100 volt DC input voltage. So you can connect more panels. So you will get, for example, in this case, GoodWe HT series, you can get 24 panels, and then the traditional inverter which is applicable only 22. And then the lower start voltage. For example, our start voltage is 200 volt. Yeah, for the high voltage. So you will the daily power generation is 0.3 until 0.5 higher than the other brands. And then we have a few multi-communication protocol like Wi-Fi is a 50 meter, and the LAN communication distance is 100 meter. And then also support RS485 with few accessories like EG Logger Pro and SEZ 1000 SCB 3000. The RS485 is max communication distance is 1000 meter. And then we also compatible with the third-party monitoring device. So it's a SolarLog or non-GoodWe monitoring platform also applicable. And then also support with 4G communication, but need to be on our list of compatibility. And then we also have the port, we call it COM4, which can do the weather station monitoring. So can do so many things like wind speed and direction, the solar panel temperature, irradiation sensor, Modbus RTU, and etc. You need to add two accessories, for example, the EG Logger Pro and the SCB 3000 from Goodby to do these things. And then the data exchange, yeah, we also available. So we have a Goodby API protocol. If you want us to open the API for you, we also can do it with NDA sign. And then also we already applicable support for the SCADA system. And then the application is come with 15 languages and 4 server deployments. And then this is the flexible installation method. Our inverter can be installed independent, lie down, bracket, or wall mount. So it is a very simple and very flexible to use. And then the replaceable design. So you can see the screw fixing, the plug design, also the block design inside our inverter is a plug and play. See, this is the inside the inverter from the heatsink, external cooling fan until the front panel. So when it comes to the after sales, you no need to worry because it's a plug and play. And then the string level monitoring is faster and more accurate. So if in one case you have a broken or maybe you need to repair, it will come with the accurate detection only with the app and monitoring portal. We have a system monitoring at SolarGo. And then the maintenance can be done at night. So in the morning it can be operate, yeah, you can get your power generation. And then at night there's a DC and AC power supply. This is the optional thing, yeah. And then the PV system can be monitored around 24 hours. And then the fault record and use USB flash disk is updated. So every record, every fault, you can use the USB and you can see what time and then what day, when is the fault, where is it, you can see the error. And then this is the long life design. You can see our inverter before it is out from the factory. We have so many tests. For example, IP65 test, the waterproof, the temperature test, the noise test, also the salt spray test. And then the aging test. It is 8 hours in the room. After that, we get out and then we ship to the overseas. And then our inverter also come with the ISO 9001 and anti-static plant. And then this is the few case reference of our inverter used overseas. Yeah, for CNI product is a Turkey, Netherlands. This is in China, and then few in Bosch factory, India. And then this one is Siemens in India. It's 4 megawatt, and that's India. And then this is in Holland, Turkey. This biggest one is 18 megawatt in Ankara, Turkey. This is in Vietnam, 2 megawatt. I think that's all. Thank you for the time and your attention. I
Thank you
think,
so much, sir, for the
Francie,
insightful and informative presentation and setting up the tone for today's program. Here, I would like to make a small announcement. Attendees can put their questions in the Q&A box, and our panelists will take those questions after the panel discussion. Richard, so we have one question for you from one of our attendees. Would you like to take it up?
yes, pardon.
So this question is for you from one of our
Okay.
attendees.
So this question is for me. What is the solar cell market share, present and future by its type? So yeah, maybe I can say that, yeah, because I'm in Indonesia market. Yeah, can you let me see again the question,
Sure, sir.
Priyansi? Yeah. Yeah, okay. Because I come from Indonesia market, yeah, I just can say the market share in the present in Indonesia is still small, because you can see in the 2020 2010 until 2015, is our government already planned the steam coal power plant, yeah, with 35 gigawatt inside. But for the renewable energy like wind energy, and then the second one is the solar, uh, it's very small. Until 2020 and 2020, they starting to plan the renewable energy because the Europe and the Arabian and other countries starting to do the renewable energy. But it's little bit too late for Indonesia. I but I believe, yeah, in 2060, which is the government from Indonesia target, we will achieve the net zero emission. I believe it will done. But for the market share, for here in Indonesia, last year we only installed around 47 something megawatt, yeah, and this year is around 62 megawatt. It's because of the so many coal power plant in Indonesia, and then the government is not ready. It's not ready for the PV, I think. And then some of the regulation I see there's a, like, want to the early retirement for the coal power plant. I don't think in these few years there will be a good market share for the solar PV, honestly, in Indonesia. I don't know in other country, but in Indonesia I think last year is still okay, but this year really very strict. Hmm. That's what I can tell you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. So now it's time to begin with our first panel discussion, which is on innovative solar power procurement models in the CNI market. And to discuss this, we have the panel with us Mr. Samrit Goyal from Solar Horizon, Mr. Richard Mercury from Goodwe, Mr. Thomas Jacobson from Indochina Energy Partners, Mr. Alan Himes from Indigo Energy MM, Mr. Niranpal Singh from Baiwari, Malaysia, Mr. Vasilios from Baskovitz Energy. Now I welcome all the panelists on the screen and requesting Sam to please take the discussion ahead. Thank you. Over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Priyanshi, for the introduction. Thank you, all the attendees, for being here. And a big thanks to all the panelists for giving us some valuable time to cover some interesting topics. I'd like to just quickly start by going around the table with a very short introduction by each of the panelists themselves. Maybe we keep it to 15 seconds, just who we are, what our companies do, and primarily which markets we'd be able to talk about today so the audience can get a good feel. So I'll just start on my left. Richard, you've had a chance to introduce, but if you could just introduce yourself quickly, and then we'll work down who I see in the list. Richard, short introduction, please.
Yes, hello Sam. Hello
Hi.
Sam. Yeah.
Yes, can hear you
Hi.
loud and clear. You're good. Okay, maybe Vasilios, just over to you, a very short introduction of your company, please.
Yes, sure. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Fantastic. Okay, perfect. Well, hello everyone. I'm Vasilis Nestelkas. I am here as AVP Energy Services from Boskowitz Energy. We are serving the Filipino market with CNI rooftop installations of solar, and also looking into serving into the residential market. Currently looking into also the market for energy certificates and energy efficiency and how to combine these in a useful manner. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, perfect. Vasilios gives us a great snapshot. So in a similar format, I'll just go next. Thomas, over to you, sir. Short introduction would be lovely.
Hello, my name is Thomas Jacobson. I'm from Indochina Energy Partners. We are based here in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. We're active in CNI rooftops, DPPA large scales. That's a Vietnamese only program, and battery storage. And we operate in Vietnam, Cambodia, and Myanmar.
Perfect. Thank you. Excellent. Alan, over to you. You are one of our new and emerging markets that have joined the fray. A little bit about you and your company and market, please. Alan, sorry, I can't
Sure.
hear you.
My name is Alan Himes, and I'm not on mute.
You're
How
good.
about
You're
now?
good. You're back. Yep, you're good. Loud and clear.
Okay. So Alan Himes, Indigo Energy, we're based in Myanmar, and we do CNI rooftop there, and based on the Myanmar market, and then we do engineering services for folks in a high labor cost markets as well. So generally not Southeast Asia, but U.S., Japan, Europe, Singapore is the exception.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay, good to know. Good to know. Yeah, we're certainly going to want to hear more about the Myanmar solar landscape. It's definitely a point of interest. Just moving on. And of course, Niranpal, somebody I actually know quite well in the industry over the years. So just short introduction from you, sir, and good to have you.
Sure. Thanks, Sam. Hello, everyone. My name is Niranpal Singh, based out of Malaysia. MD for BayWa RE in Malaysia, as well as for Energy Solutions in APAC. So just a little bit on BayWa. So BayWa is a German developer, been present in Asia Pacific since 2016, present in 9 countries, developing projects, wind and solar, as well as solar trade arm for equipment trading. And since 2019, basically ventured into CNI. So we have teams present on the ground in Malaysia, in Vietnam, explored Indonesia, and of course the Philippines, Singapore, and some of these other markets as well. Yeah, glad to be here.
Perfect.
Over to you, Sam.
Thank you, Niranpal. I remember when you guys had just started exploring, we were discussing for Singapore back before the pandemic hit. Very
Exactly.
short introduction by myself. I am the CEO and founder of Solar Horizon. We are a boutique developer in Singapore. We have been CNI specialists since the last 10 or 12 years now. It's what we do for a living, and we've been doing it for a while. It's been a tough journey, like everybody can see in the solar. We have our battle scars, but I'm really glad we hung on because the future is bright. Excuse the pun. Things are really picking up in the region, and I think over the years, in a lot of these panels, we've all talked about, hey, regulation can improve, or economics are a challenge, or looking at how different models are applicable in certain markets and others. And there's always been, and from my experience, kind of an interesting climate about our views towards it. Some years we're all very optimistic. Some years we're a bit more down. But I feel this year particularly has been an interesting one, primarily around new regulation that is directly impacting the CNI, or commercial industrial space. So just for the audience today, we're going to kind of deep dive into 3 main topics. One, like I just mentioned, is the impact of regulation. And we have a wonderful spread of speakers from each one of the different markets that are kind of hot markets. So we'll talk about that. Um, we then are going to dive into carbon credits and RECs, or renewable energy certificates, RECs for short, and how these instruments, let's call them, are changing the landscape within Southeast Asia. It's written in one of the questions that how do they make it more lucrative? I think us industry players had a little inside laugh when we saw that, because that's what we've been trying to do for the last 10 odd years, is to unlock value in this market. So we're going to talk about those new business models, carbon credits and RECs, compare and contrast. Um, and finally, the third one, which is kind of the big trending hot topic, which is net zero. How do we help companies get to a more holistic solution, using the rooftop, using the ground, using the energy appliances? And I think a number of you have mentioned, particularly Vasilios as well as Narampal, that you're active in these kind of 360-degree solutions. So we'll end with that, which is a more positive view. So I'd like to start with a couple of the big regulatory highlights that we as an industry have been quite excited about. Uh, I think Philippines has been a bright spot, where the notorious negative list has been dropped for the power sector. It basically means foreign FDI is now no longer needing to take a minority role. There's no more limits. So maybe we can just start there, and perhaps over to you, Vasilios, who's dialing in from Manila. Well, we can just tell us a bit about that regulation. How do you see it impacting specifically CNI? And then we'll hop to some of the different markets in the same vein. So over to you, Vasilios.
All right. Well, thank you for the quick reference. So, yeah, for the Philippines as of now, it's one of the biggest steps forward for the country. It needed this opening up of the foreign investment desperately. So, if we're looking into the outlook of the future energy growth of the country, we have like a disparity between what is the country expected to like consume in the future and what is the country currently having in the pipeline in terms of power generation facilities to actually be able to provide for these for this large increase in power consumption. And I believe the renewable energy sector here plays a major role. And having these opportunities to bring in foreign capital and also foreign majority ownership into the field is gonna give a big disruption to the current state of the art, state of the market. When
Sorry,
it comes
Vasilius,
to
just a quick
yes.
question there. The disruption you referred to, give us some examples that you either can see or foresee that this would open up.
For sure, like the biggest impact will be definitely the pricing. I think I'm not sure if everyone is aware, but the Philippines has amongst the highest electricity rates in the whole Southeast Asia region. Despite being a rather low-income country, this poses a significant threat to international competitiveness of the businesses and also captures a significant part of the income of the people. So with this disruption happening, with the ability to bring in foreign knowledge, foreign capital, foreign companies that are going to tackle these challenges, this will overall bring the electricity prices down, will make the entire landscape in the commercial and industrial sector more competitive internationally, and will hence hopefully also increase investments in other parts of the country.
You made such an interesting point here because, of course, we as solar guys, I can speak for myself. Me as a solar guy, I always look at regulation with regards to solar. But in this case, it is across the entire power generation sector. So I found
Correct.
it very interesting that you referred to a regulation that actually is going to, from what your view, and I believe I share that view, that it's going to impact the entire electricity generation sector in terms of reducing prices. So let me ask you this: how do you think that will impact solar for the CNI sector in specifically, given
Oh,
this foreign expertise and
given,
lower cost of capital?
well, I think solar will particularly benefit from that since the Philippines is a very sunny country. It offers perfect conditions for solar power generation in general. So I think we can say that compared to, for example, European markets, we can technically have a way lower LCOEs in the Philippines than in countries that are already transitioning to a more green, more solar-powered electricity market. So yeah, the solar generation will be a major beneficiary of this.
Nice tie-in. I like that. Makes a lot of sense. Hey, thanks a lot, Vasilios. Those some great insights. I want to use that as a segue actually over to Thomas. Thomas, you mentioned something interesting in your introduction, which is the Vietnam only program, the so-called DPPA. Sir, would you be able to give us a little insight into what exactly is happening right now in Vietnam CNI and whether there has been the new regulations, have they been implemented? Are you actually seeing another big gold rush this time on the rooftops, or is there still a gap, as mentioned earlier, between the on-ground reality and the regulation? Would love to hear from you on Vietnam.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, first of all, the CNI market rooftop is not connected to the DPPA. So if we
Okay.
take the CNI part first, there the still are still the same rules as there always have been. You have to be under 1.25 megawatt, and that has been reaffirmed by the government many times. You have to be under 35 kV connection point. You have to be connected to a roof, and a roof is defined in the law and construction in Vietnam very clearly.
Ah,
So nobody
ah.
can be in doubt. And then for the last 2 years, you have to be 100% self-consumption. So the only
Oh
new thing in the
wow,
last 2 years is is
wow.
yeah, and that comes on the back end of 16 gigawatts being built in 2-3 years. under similar laws as what is now in the Philippines, but actually with surprisingly little foreign capital and surprisingly little need of foreign expertise.
Interesting.
Um so that was just the background there. So that CNI market is plodding along slowly because now everything is 100% self-consumption, and that means anyone who is not working 7 days a week has long holidays. I mean, anybody in the export of furniture or garments at the moment, where they're looking at shutting down factories for the next 6 months due to lack of orders, they are obviously very
That's what's
difficult to.
happening? Really, Thomas? I wasn't aware of that. Could you just share a little bit more
I
about what's the on-ground reality? Because we hear so many different things on LinkedIn. I keep seeing
oh
all these big projects in Vietnam rooftop coming up. Is that really what's happening?
No, there's very little coming up. I mean, that somebody shows that they have signed an MOU for 1.8 megawatts. That is not a boom anymore. When we in 3 years made 16 gigawatts, 16 gigawatts in 3 years, that's a boom. After that, the whole infrastructure that's there is slowly plodding along, but plodding along well. There's no issue in that at all. And there are lots of bankable projects out there. The DPPA is quite different, and maybe I
Please tell
should
us
just
more.
take that. You don't want me to take that afterwards, so that everybody
No,
we just go through with
yeah,
it.
maybe
Oh,
just give us a quick
okay.
differentiation
So very,
because
very,
even
very
people like me were
okay.
not
So
aware.
so
Yeah.
very simply, the DPPA is a contract for difference in Vietnam. It is still in draft mode, but a lot of the
This is
supporting
really interesting.
legislation has now been put in place that wasn't in 2019, and then obviously 20 and 21 they were COVID years. Partially 22 was a COVID year also here in Vietnam. Um, and basically, it's contract for difference, which means that an investor, for example, us, makes a 50 megawatt, for example, solar, uses the grid to sell to the wholesale market. The buyer, he is still buying from the normal retail prices. And then we make a contract for difference because the wholesale market that the investor has to sell into is between 0 and 6 cents, and that's obviously not bankable. So that means that the off-taker has to come in and give some form of assurance. Again, obviously, um, off-taker is not going to give a blanket 5 cents or 6 cents. We will give as market support no matter what, because then they could end up having double normal electricity prices, which, as we just heard from the Philippines, obviously, cost of energy is always a concern for exporting companies.
That's so
So that's the
interesting.
basics
I'm
of it,
definitely,
and that is
yeah.
getting ready to go now, and to the tune of 1 gigawatt.
Oh, this is so interesting. In fact, that's going to be a really good topic to compare and contrast with Malaysia and Singapore. In fact, I've been doing a lot of VPPA myself. We call it virtual power purchase agreement. In fact, I'm going to use that to just segue to Malaysia, actually, and I'll come back to Indonesia and then Myanmar shortly. Niranpal, I'd like to segue to you, sir, because there has been another big news this year that
Yep.
finally the long-awaited liberalization of Malaysia power market when it comes to the kind of virtual PPA or the SPPA. I think each country has its difference, but I believe it's a very similar instrument, right? The CFD. So I'd like
Exactly.
to just pick your brains a little bit about that program, and also particularly from the lens of how this new regulation, in your view, is going to either support or impede the CNI solar market.
All right. Yeah. So maybe just a quick kind of lead into that corporate topic. Um, so on the CNI front, generally we have had a very stable program, the net metering program, and
Mhm.
Malaysia is a market where generally the programs are offered a specific quota, say for a year or 18 months, and basically it was 300 megawatts where you could apply for net metering quota. So as Thomas put it, for sectors where they operate on kind of variable days, let's say 5-day weeks, and they may have like 10, 15 days shutdown in a year, they could basically opt for a net metering program where then they get the credits back. um, there's a self-consumption program as well, and generally that's generally open, not limited by any quota. So you just apply basically based on your maximum demand. The only limiting factor is that it's based on a maximum demand of your facility. So the view is that as long you are capped within 75% of your maximum demand, you can basically set up that particular size in terms of system. Um, so what's and where does the difference come in? And obviously, Malaysia has been kind of on a transition, and we are a little bit delayed, but still on that same path. And Malaysia has committed towards at least 40% RE by 2035, which means that we've got a 10 gigawatt gap to where we need to be. Um, and that basically led the government to issue a 1.2 gigawatt quota last year. So the announcement was done this year in September, and part of that program is the 600 megawatt, what they call the Green Corporate Power Purchase Program, which is similar to as what Thomas kind of reflected. It's similar to the DPPA program. It's a CFD. Generally, it's a cost program, so you don't get an offset. So if you build a system on your facility, on your site, you basically get to leverage the LCOEs for that particular development, and generally it is lower than tariff. This program is generally paying above. It's a CFD. It's what they call a financial hedge above um, the market. So there is a wholesale market. It's called the NEDA market, and NEDA stands for the New Energy Dispatch Agreement. It was a market that was created for old IPP plants, and this included thermal plants as well that had
Oh,
exceeded their generating license. So after the 21 years, they basically got on this market. Kind of did a year-to-year supply, and the government at that point in time decided to open this up for RE as well. Now, the only difference is that um, there's two categories. Generally, large merchant, which then basically competing with all the thermal plants, and the other category is the um, basically below 30 megawatts where you are price taker. So for this particular program, generally on the 600 megawatts, each developer has an ability to invest into one particular site below 30 megawatts, submit kind of a package before the first week of February. That's when the
oh,
submission
it's soon,
ends.
huh?
It's
Okay.
soon. What you need to do is you need to wrap it with the corporate off-taker to basically consider that financial hedge. So it's a total match. You have to
Also,
have
you
a
have to get
site.
your off-taker as well
You have to
committed.
get your off-taker
You put the
committed,
full project
MOU.
economics.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the issue is that it's a program that's just been issued recently, and there's kind of a short period to convince off-takers. There's a very I would say there isn't a deep view of the merchant market as well, right? So the consideration is a lot of these corporates have not planned, not budgeted for such programs. What they knew about was the availability of the green energy tariff, I think, which was something you also brought up in consideration, RECs or certificates. So Malaysia started certificates um, a couple of years ago, and what they started doing was they started marketing these certificates for the large scale programs. So all the LSS1 to LSS4 programs, there is a clause in the PPA that says that the government actually owns the certificates, and they have the right to then sell
Hmm.
or use that component as an offset into any green tariff programs, which is what they eventually did. And they priced that program. So it's currently priced at 3.7 cents ringgit, but it's a factor of about 10% to the commercial tariff, which is now at 36.5 cents, and so on. And we all know that next year is where the state utility has also announced that they will start raising pricing. So eventually
Going
that
up again, huh? Hmm.
that um, green tariff rider would also start to move up in tandem. So this is kind of a view. So while we have green tariffs available and the offsets of providing certificates from the state utility, there is also now this new program that comes into play, and it's a view for corporates to kind of understand. Okay, if I do this, it's a longer term hedge. But again, the question is the readiness of corporates and whether they're ready to commit into a longer term contract, knowing what they know today. Now, some of them are, some of I think Sam, some of the larger tech companies in Singapore. The only avenue for them is to go out to the market and pay $35 to $50, and it varies, right, per certificate, and that's the way they offset. So as opposed to that, this is relatively cheap. Um, but again, I mean, the certificates cannot be transferred to across the border, so it can't be offset into Singapore. So that's end of the day, that's the big question, right? Everyone across the border is waiting and willing to pay. Everyone in the
All my
country,
customers want Malaysia Rex. They don't want to pay for Singapore prices.
exactly. But
Yeah.
we've kind of got a view from CDP as well.
Mm,
I think about a year ago they were willing to grandfather any PPAs that were signed cross-border CFD, but the
mm,
Malaysian market was not ready, so there wasn't any projects into the NEDA market that had this ability to just free up racks in that volumes to be able to contract. I mean, if the timing worked, it would have been great. And of course there's a view of the energy markets and energy borders as well. While
mm.
there is a cross-border program, and I think you know that, Sam, EMA had that tender, the RFP out, and we are actually supplying 100 megawatts, but it's brown at the moment. It's a pilot program for 2 years, and then basically, on the Singapore end, they will issue a license for longer, and it's supposed to be then the RE component that comes up. But Malaysia cancelled that at the 11th hour, so they stopped the RE component. So it's just basically
Indonesia
brown.
stepped in to take that space. You know what
Exactly.
I'm going to do,
So
Naram? I'm just
within,
going to sorry to
sure,
interrupt you. I'm
go
just going
ahead.
to hold the Rex topic for a second. We're going to come back to that, but I want to just first of all thank you for sharing the compare and contrast with Vietnam. It's very interesting. I want to just bring it back on the regulation because you see we've now talked about markets that, in my view, are relatively advanced solar markets, right? And while Indonesia, which is the biggest market combined just from its sheer size and demand, unfortunately, regulation has not caught up with the demand. Richard, I'd like to turn our spotlight towards Indonesia, one of my personal favorite markets. I've done business there. We were one of the first to do solar PPA in Bali at a theme park. It was very nice to spend time in Bali to do that installation. But my business wasn't able to scale in Indonesia because the infamous MEMR, I think 59 or something, had come out that basically stopped net metering, put the caps in place. They had the sun tax of some 30 days or
Yeah.
30%. It basically broke the model, and a lot of FDI and developers like us from Singapore, after many years of hard work to do pilots, we're just not able to scale. So we all went home with our tail between our legs, and then the pandemic hit.
Yeah,
Since then, I haven't been back on ground. But I would love to kind of ask you, please, to share, firstly, uh, what is the current regulation? What is happening? Do we still have net metering? Is there a cap? Is it one to one? And then, secondly, how do you see the impact on CNI right now? And thirdly, a bit about also what Thomas mentioned, this gap between the regulation and the on-ground reality, right? So these three would be really nice to hear from you, Richard.
Okay. Thank you, Sam. So, sorry, just now I'm not introduced myself. I am Richard from Indonesia. Actually, I am representative Goodwi in Indonesia. So we also working with Baiwa, yeah, Baiwa in Indonesia in a few projects. Because Baiwa also is a developer, I think, in this case. So nice to hear from Mr. Niran. Yeah, the scheme in Malaysia is, I think, it's not the same. Like in Malaysia you have quota, but in Indonesia we don't have it. And then I would say that the first is the regulation is very complicated in Indonesia. How can I say like that? Because the first, yeah, uh, when it comes to 2021, the PRN or our electricity company, they agree 100% of install capacity. Okay, and then everybody is very happy, and then they do their own system at house, in the factory, in school, everywhere. And then the government also give subsidize, I mean, that, you know what I mean, give the some small money, yeah, for the to engage to support this PV system in every condition. But in 2022, in the Q2, if I'm not wrong, the government start to complain, because what, there's a too many, as I said in the beginning, there's a too many coal power plant already installed in Indonesia. And then the scheme for this power plant is take or pay. Okay, so it means that if you don't want to take this, if you want to don't want to pay, you have a minimum tariff need to pay to the investor, and this will cost a lot of money for the Indonesian government. That's why, if all of the if all of the CNI for factory or houses using this kind of system, PV system in Indonesia, they think that PLN will lose a lot of money, because PLN is oversupply right now. So they started to do so many restriction. For example, when you apply for the new houses, 2,200 or 4,400 watt, in a small houses, you need to fulfill so many documents for harmonize, analyze, electrical analyze, this analyze and that analyze. There's so
Power
many.
harmonics for a residential
Yeah. I
installation.
mean that,
Really?
you know what I mean. It is very very strict, and I don't know what they're thinking about. Uh, so this I think this year is very very bad for Indonesia.
Yeah. Richard,
And
tell
then
me a little bit about the net metering. Is there any cap right now? Similarly, like for example, Niran mentioned the 75%, or Thomas mentioned 1.25. Is there any cap on net metering right now in Indonesia?
yeah, for net metering, I already told you. You mean the export metering from the
Yes,
PRN, right?
correct, correct.
I told you PRN never give you that. You will never get, from the Q2 until
Wow.
now, you will never get your net metering. Even you already apply in from 10 houses, almost 8 houses not get the net metering. This is the current condition in Indonesia.
Wow, talk about a harsh on ground
They said
reality.
to
It
you,
makes me feel depressed, that because how else will the country progress with its goals? It's announced 100 gigawatt solar and so
yeah,
on.
yeah.
But if we
So
can't get net metering, I mean, what about CNI? Have you, or anybody for that matter, for the panel in Indonesia, has anybody got any recent megawatt scale CNI news in terms of net metering? Anything yourself, Richard, on the larger scale stuff?
okay, let me tell you, for the CNI,
Mm.
CNI, some of the factory owner, they, so we have actually two regulation in Indonesia. The first one is the energy ministry. The second
Mhm.
one is the PRN. Okay, so who make the regulation is come from the ESDM, we call energy minister, issued 100% a low capacity, but PLN is not allow, is not do the ESDM regulation, not follow the regulation. So when it comes to the CNI, some of the factory owner obey or allow PLN. They don't want to install the full capacity, only what 10% until 15% from the capacity applied.
10 to 15% only.
Yeah,
Yes,
there is like a 15% cap. I mean, if Malaysia was the 75% view,
Uh, uh,
in Indonesia currently is that 15%, and I think as Richard also
one
pointed,
five. I
one
mean,
five,
yeah,
fifteen
yeah,
percent,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
what
and
a
and
waste.
and then as Richard pointed out, I mean, you can basically challenge that, but it involves basically getting a consultant, running a power study, and you can imagine the cost, right? So who's going to pay for that upfront study? The client
Yeah,
is not going to. I mean, if you offer them a PPA, then basically clients come back and say that, well, it's in your business model that says zero investment, so the developers have
You
to pay
pay.
for it. But
Yeah.
investors, I mean, it's a 50-50 thing, right? And I think in Indonesia, it's more like 90-10. There's a slim 10% chance that you get it. But again, you've got to spend money, it's time, and whether it's worth the investment, because there's been changes from time to time as well. And again, I mean, there's a lot of big capacity available. There's a lot of big projects. We participated in a couple of big tenders. If you just basically take the cement sector, right? So it's one of the largest sectors that needs to decarbonize, and they are trying, right? So there's all these companies, even like Cement Indonesia and so on, that they've rolled up tenders, 20,
Yeah.
30 megawatts per site. But again, whether that is developed or not is another question, because there's a lot of approvals, and basically you run through hoops, right? And these delays are something that, if an investor has the patience for, then I think it might pay off. But again, if you are faced with too many hurdles and there isn't
Yeah,
an
upfront
avenue,
costs that you don't have a assurance, right, of your ROI. I
exactly,
mean,
yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
So
you hit upon this nice point, and about earlier also you had said that gap between readiness from demand of customer and the
Mm.
market. Let's say in this case
yeah,
it's the opposite, where
it's
there
opposite.
seems to be the demand and a gap between the supply and regulation. So in fact, this is a perfect segue for Alan. Having now laid out all the different kind of regulatory landscape in Southeast Asia, I am particularly keen to hear a bit more about Myanmar. As mentioned, we have an inquiry from the Mercedes-Benz showroom in Yangon. I'll send it to you. But the point I'm making is, I don't know anything about solar regulation in Myanmar, what the market dynamics are like. So based on what some of the speakers have shared in terms of different regulatory or incentive structures, and then of course the gap between reality and on ground. Yeah, I would love to hear from you. Tell us a bit more about solar in Myanmar.
Sure, sure. So I'll start in 2020. So a couple of years ago, there was a
Mm.
1 gigawatt tender that probably most people are aware of. And I think maybe 1 out of 30 or 0 out of 30 projects were built of that.
Yes.
Um, and that's a combination of uh, poor planning on the government's part at the time, and the fact that government was thrown out 6 or 8 months later in the coup that happened in February last year. So the utility scale market has done a few projects. They've been essentially crony led projects of the, say, 20, 30, 40 megawatt scale type developments. No international players touch those except for some, even a lot of the Chinese players who were involved in the first tender in 2020. They're not involved. So it's quite you have to have a lot of appetite for risk, or a lot of risk mitigation built into your model through local relationships to be able to feel sure that you're going to get paid from the government. And because Myanmar has the same electricity sector as most places in Southeast Asia, it's centralized, run by the government.
Sure. Well
So
planned.
that leaves the CNI space, and that's from a regulatory perspective. I always say there's the plus and minus of Myanmar solar is that there's not a lot of regulations, right? So when somebody says, "Oh, can I do solar?" It's like, well, can you not do solar? If you ask, then somebody will just tell you no. But if you don't ask, then nobody's going to ask any questions at all. So, and I understand in terms of PPAs and rolling out a portfolio of projects for international investors, nobody likes to hear that. But if you are a factory owner and you're spending 40, 50, 60% of your energy comes from diesel these days, which are real numbers that we hear, then you have a very strong economic incentive to get it done. And basically nobody's going to tell you not to. you know every now and then the electrical inspection department will show up, and on our projects, I think we've only had them show up once, and then they said, "Oh, your phase tape is the wrong color, so you need to change the color of your L1, L2, L3 electrical tape. So that's fairly easy to resolve, and that's not really about the tape, right? It's about the service charges that go along with it.
Ah,
Um,
I see.
so there's not a lot of regulation, which, yeah, like I said, it's good and bad. It's really more about just pure economics, and obviously there's no incentives from the government. It's there's no net metering, there's no feed-in tariff. You're usually the meters will actually run the wrong way if you backfeed into the meters. We've had this. So in some cases, and Thomas knows well, the meter will actually run backwards, right? But after they swap out those meters, because we've installed systems a few years ago, which essentially you're getting net metering, right? The electricity provider didn't intend for it to be, but you're getting it just because you're lucky with your meter. But then they figure that out, and then they swap your meter with one that doesn't allow that, charges you the other way, it charges you double. So I had to go proactively on some projects just because regulation, economic driven, more of a market at the moment.
Okay, sorry, there was a little bit of cutout in the last bit, Alan. I'm not sure if that was on my side, but I believe I caught that last piece, which is the kind of economic incentive, and how you gotta have to, in a way, dodge the arbitrary authorities' involvement and inspection. And frankly, having lived in Southeast Asia most of my life, I can understand that in certain markets, look, things are not as developed and not as enforceable. In fact, I want to quickly just pick Thomas's brain here. You had mentioned earlier that you're active also in Laos and Cambodia. Just for the sake of getting the full spectrum, Thomas, could you just share a couple of insights as to the state of solar CNI, particularly with regards to regulation incentive? How is it different to Myanmar as well as to Vietnam?
Myanmar and Cambodia. So Myanmar already covered by Alan, who
Yes.
I think you were introduced as the new guy, but I remember meeting you first time in Yangon in 2015 about rooftop solar, Alan. So not all that new, not all that new.
Nice.
In
I
Cambodia,
meant more like
in
Myanmar is the new kid on the block. Just FYI, I was talking
okay,
about the
okay, not
market.
not not
Yes.
Alan, not Alan himself. I
Yeah.
he looks
Clearly, we
younger,
all
but
have
he's
enough salt and pepper here not to not
yeah.
to be that young anymore.
Very good. In Cambodia, there's also a limit on the size, and I believe that is, or not believe, but that is calculated based on the transformer size measured in MVA kVA at a 90% power factor, and then you're allowed to do 50% of that measured in megawatt peak, I believe. So that means a factory with two MVA transformers, for example, they are allowed to do just under a megawatt.
Understood.
Yeah, and then but the trick there is that you then change your energy tariffs. So in Cambodia, there's a daytime and a nighttime, and that then changes what those exact tariffs are. So the calculation of savings is actually um, not difficult, but it's more complicated in Cambodia. But otherwise, it's a system that's not a million miles off what we see in neighboring countries. And there have been in Cambodia a few cases of people exceeding these rules, and they have gotten in serious trouble. Coca-Cola in sea, for example.
Interesting. Thomas, could you just tell us a bit in terms of the incentive structure? So is it purely economic where there's a high electricity price, or is there some form of net metering or compensation? And how do you see that kind of shape the progress of the CNI space in Cambodia?
That there's no feed-in tariff for additional. As I said, INSEE, I believe that they are now actually being forced to feed in all their power at 6 cents and then buy it back at 11 or 13 cents. But there's no feed-in structure, and you will get less and less of that in the region going forward because the build-out is so good. Everybody from Myanmar to Philippines has been able to explain that the economics are there. You
Yes.
are no longer, as Niranpal said, you're no longer in the need of really having to have the green credentials.
Hmm.
That's nice to say for all off takers, for all of us as human beings, as businesses. There's no doubt about that, but it is very much talking to people's wallets and less to their hearts these days.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
very different from 10
Yeah.
years ago, where it was all about doing good. But today it's very
Sure.
much an economic transaction that just happens to be about solar power. And it's treated like any
Yeah.
other PPA leasing style agreement in all
Yes.
countries, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes. So well said, Thomas. In fact, it's an interesting statement because on one side it makes me feel like, oh, we used to be kind of solar eco warriors, but on the other side, it's like, okay, we've grown up as an industry. This is a serious business. The same regulation, for example, in Philippines that applies to brown power is now going to apply to solar. So we're no longer that special or disadvantaged or need subsidies. And I, for one, who have really been in Singapore throughout as my solar journey, in Singapore, subsidy is a vulgar word, okay, quote unquote, our prime minister. The point is, I think Singapore has approached its solar program quite differently. We never had feed-in tariff. Um, we did implement an excellent net metering program, and in fact, over the last few years, I think it has been showcased as a win-win program, because in this case, while the government or the grid, which again is monopolized and owned by the state, SP services, but they've become the wire operator, right? So in fact, they've separated now the generation function from the grid management function. So a lot of us solar IPPs, the independent power producers, we do enjoy net metering, but we have to minus off the grid usage charge, which I personally think is a very fair model. If I'm using your wire, I pay you for it. I can still generate at a significant spread from what your wholesale market is providing, right? So it was a successful model. And in fact, I want to share a little bit about Singapore because we've heard now from all of the Southeast Asian countries and their regulation. Singapore was lauded for its lack of regulation in many ways. When we talk about the open electricity market, right? We are the first 100% liberalized market in Southeast Asia and have been an excellent model for both Philippines and for Malaysia to an extent. Indonesia has its own set of rules, let's call them, and different economic drivers. I really like what you said, Richard, that we are competing with 35 gigawatt of existing planned coal capacity under take or pay. So, and as what you pointed out, Thomas, if now solar is nothing different, then it's no longer the green, right? If I have to pay this guy 5 cents for my take or pay, why am I going to pay another 10 to the solar guy? So I think this now leads to the second big topic, which is the economic incentives and economic landscape. We've now examined regulation quite well. We've done some good compare and contrast with Malaysia, with Vietnam, with Philippines. We've come to see that the impact of regulation is clearly a large driver of solar CNI. But let us shift the onus away from the government and what the government can do and should do, and look at what we can take responsibility for as both an industry as well as adopters, which is, yeah, it's money talks, right? So I'd like to use this to introduce the topic of kind of working towards RECs and carbon credits as an innovative business model to make the CNI more lucrative. So let's open that using the kind of financial incentive and moving away from just regulation, which has opened up. So maybe I'd like to actually start with Singapore on this one. At COP27, as well as recently this year, Singapore has announced its net zero goal, 2050. It is a staggering goal, and it is certainly not going to be realized by solar alone, right? There's a lot of other things that are coming into the mix. But when I look at what's happening in our market, we are facing the inverse scenario, Thomas, of what you're facing in Vietnam, whereby your wholesale price is much lower than the solar tariff. In Singapore, it's the complete opposite. Electricity prices have spiked by maybe 60% at wholesale, maybe 70 over this last year. The reliance on natural gas and the crisis in Europe has completely decimated the natural gas spot contracts and spot pricing. There is no longer a supply and demand driven economics here because there's always been an oversupply in Singapore, as most people may know. Um, and it is really, I mean, it's shocking. Companies who were paying 11 Singapore dollar cents per kilowatt hour, that's about 7 USD, are today paying 33 cents. At these prices, solar is a 2-year payback. Let me repeat that, 2-year payback. I can bona fide say this as I have just made an offer and model the client's pricing. It is a 2-year payback. Now, in this scenario, you know, it's not even about regulation, right? It's just silly not to do something that can offer you such an high return, significantly higher than your core business that can earn you. Very less companies or products or industries in this world could earn 45% IRR, right? So with this as a fundamental, where the economic shifts and the economic incentive of adopting solar vis-a-vis all the VUCA world, right? Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. This is the world we are now living in. So in this scenario, with the financial incentive, I'd like to perhaps ask Vasilios here, who in backstage mentioned you're looking to learn a little bit more about RECs and carbon credits. Tell us, Vasilios, from the perspective of the Philippines renewable market, what are some of the things you'd like to know more about? And maybe then some of the panelists can jump in and we can make it a bit more free flowing discussion. So maybe we'll start with you, Vasilios, with a few questions that you'd like to hear, and any of the panelists who would like to contribute, please jump in.
Yeah, it would be very interesting for me to know how, especially the international carbon credit and renewable energy certificate market is being implemented. Here currently in the Philippines, we are having a mostly domestic, or sorry, not even mostly, it's entirely domestic market. We are trading here with renewable energy certificates that the distribution utilities are requested or required by law to implement. So they have a specific percentage of their sourcing that needs to be renewable. And those who cannot source them locally are allowed to purchase those RECs through the internal domestic market. However, there's basically little to zero effort to internationalize that. As I see it, it would open up a whole bunch of new potential money for investments, since obviously it's way cheaper in a Southeast Asian country to reduce 1 ton of carbon dioxide emissions compared to doing that in the developed countries, in the industrialized countries. So all of this money would then, instead of like investing into new solar fields in Europe, in the US, in Canada, whatsoever, it could all flow directly into Southeast Asia or maybe even Africa, like countries that really have low costs to implement renewable energy sources due to labor, due to import, due to local production whatsoever. And all these carbon dioxide emissions can be captured at a much, much lower price, while in the meantime also providing with more capital to reinvest and to expand that business and create additional revenue sources. It's basically a vicious circle of generating more cash, more investments into decarbonizing like our market domestically, both as internationally as well in one go.
Yeah, some really good insights and questions there. I like your insight of recognizing the ability to kind of arbitrage between low cost and higher cost basis. And of course, it opens up the whole discussion about who are the polluters and who's responsible and blah, blah, blah. But
Exactly.
to the questions that you asked on how it's being set up internationally, I'd like to open the floor to any of the speakers who have some experience and like to share how they see the internationalization or regionalization of RECs and how that would impact CNI Solar, sorry.
Well, RECs are notoriously a national system, and for good reason. Um, and that means that in Vietnam, for example, a REC has near to no value. So if you're an exporter in Vietnam, then as an alternative to the DPPA, you can buy unbundled RECs, and then your standard dirty power, and that cleans you up, and that is allowed under RE100 rules as long as there
Yes.
is no DPPA program. Um,
Mhm.
but of course, everybody hopes that, oh, could we sell our RECs at 10 times or 30 times the price to Singapore? But of course, in Singapore, they have high value because there is very little green. Sorry, what happened there? There's very little green production in Singapore within the national borders. Of course, the consumption and CO2 content of power in Singapore is not so high, but it's a
Absolutely.
notoriously national market.
Yeah, that's such a good insight. In fact, I'll just comment on that from a Singapore perspective, just to give some example. Unbelievably, the cost of a renewable energy credit or carbon offset, whatever we call it, is almost 35 Singapore dollars a megawatt hour, 37 the last I checked. And over in Malaysia, it's less than 10 times that. Okay. If I'm not wrong, Niran, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it is at least a factor of almost 10. And here's the thing. I personally have been following this quite closely. There's a big talk about high quality offsets, right? High quality offsets. And Vasilios, this does play to one of the points. The truth is, if I'm a company in, let's say, UK, right, where I have a big steam engine plant, for example, whatever, big cement plant, let's just say. Now, I'm polluting there, and I am increasing carbon in that market at a certain cost. But if I have the ability to go to, let's say, India, where the whole thing is done at one-tenth the price, and just buy those recs, is it really fair? Is it really fair that I'm arbitraging on a lower cost of production to offset a higher cost of pollution? I'm not saying I have a view either way. It can be debated till the cows come home. But I think that is one important point, right? And that's why, Thomas, the nationalization, national nature of regs is pretty clear. Having said that, you know, this is a question I have. It's just an idea that comes. Uh, what if we do a private CFD? What if there is an international standardization between the risk premium or cost premium of generating RECs in different countries vis-a-vis the cost of pollution? And ultimately, if two private parties agree, and the certain established regulations like RE100, for example, or science-based targets or whatever, allow for those, then is that wrong? If it's a private commercial arrangement. But what I can say, having tried to do Malaysia and Singapore cross-border CFD on two different spot markets. So imagine the maths near, and I couldn't crack it. It's bloody hard. Where we have to, I mean, Spain and Germany are doing it in Europe now to some extent, and it's challenging. And there's a level of scale involved. But of course, in our case, 5, 10 megawatt, 10, 20 megawatt, or even 5 megawatt rooftop, to try to pull off the mathematics, let alone the regulation, is hard. So with that, I'd like to maybe ask yourself, Naranpal, what are your views on cross-border RECs or RECs integration as a way to make solar CNI more lucrative?
Mhm. I think end of the day, I also go back to what Thomas has mentioned. I mean, Rex, and basically, um, the carbon offsets should belong in a particular country because end of the day, you need to kind of manage it in the country first. Um, and there is this other topic about, yes, I mean, the cross-border, kind of distribution of access certificates, right? So if you take a country like maybe Laos or even Cambodia, and there's ability to build projects just from a carbon offset standpoint, and that helps the country lower their kind of energy footprint. That could be an avenue in the future, but again, it's very political as well, um, and it has to also be driven by some of these multinationals where they are also present. They have multiple footprints in different countries, and it's basically how they set up internally and what's the motivation. Generally, we've had conversations with some of these corporates, and they try to at least consume and offset, expire 70 or 80%. So a larger amount of DREX in a particular country. And if they have access, maybe bring it into a market like Singapore where there isn't a view or there's no ability to actually offset. So, in that sense, then, you're basically putting your hand to the heart and saying that in a way, you're doing it more or less right, and trying your best to kind of,
Mm,
get towards net zero. So there are
mm.
different views again, as you put it. I mean,
Yeah, it's
you
a good
know,
view, Nirampal. You make me question actually for myself. Like I don't want to sort of share my own personal views, but you make me certainly question that. Let's say, I mean, because Singapore is our main focus, right? We do this day in day out. I've been doing it for 12 years, and I can tell you that the market wants to do it.
yeah,
Big MNCs
true.
want to procure 15, 20 megawatt of VPPA, virtual power purchase agreement. My challenge is, where do I put it, guys? The only source of public land is controlled by the government, and they have, I wouldn't use the word crony led, that's a big word for Singapore, but there's certainly a lot of, it's the same two people who keep winning these tenders, right? So there's only one source you go to. And I believe in fair market competition. I don't believe in monopolization, even if it is for certain, let's say, darling companies. But the point here is, where do we get these rooftops? Most rooftops in Singapore for the industrial sector are owned by the government. Jurong Town Council is an authority that owns the rooftop rights and can, in some cases, dictate what the tenants who might have 20-year lease can do or cannot do on their rooftop. So, in this situation, coming back to your point, Naren, is if I can't find rooftops or available space, yet I have the capital, yet I have the demand, yet I have the desire, what do I do? Right? And I think with that, Priyanshi, I notice you're here. We only have about 10 minutes left, but I do want to, on this topic, just bring it to the other two panelists quickly. Richard, um, you know, tell us a little bit about from on ground in Indonesia. Do any of your customers talk about RECs or carbon credits? Is it a thing yet? Is it a driver in the market? How relevant is it for CNI Solar?
Yeah, I think for Indonesia, yeah, not very major between like Singapore, Malaysia, or maybe Philippines. Yeah, it's a very very early stage in our country. And then all of the developer who come to Indonesia, they just develop the factory, and then the factory owner actually, I see that most of them not really know what is the carbon trade. And then I don't want to say that, but some of the developer is like keeping the secret about the renewable energy certificate, which can be used later for the trade if already open like other country. This is what happened in Indonesia right now, because everybody don't know about these things in Indonesia. They think that these things is not precious. Okay, they think that,
And,
oh,
and maybe it's not today, but in 5 years, let's say,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because
yeah,
the
yeah.
developers keep the ownership of the RECs for the whole PPA project, isn't it?
Yes, it's a very early stage, I think, in Indonesia. Uh,
Yeah, that's a really good point. I like what you said, Richard, that, the lack of awareness and education, and frankly, Indonesia being such a huge market, and I know that firsthand, a lot of the solar sales cycle is about helping the customer understand what the hell is solar, right? How does it actually work, and can you actually make
yes,
money? And
true.
frankly, I with you, I share and I echo the sentiment that certain developers, we used to call them the solar cowboys, uh, are spreading different type of information. For example, the harsh reality of getting the PLN net metering, and you said it yourself in an open forum, and I respect that 8 out of 10 applicants don't even get it. So to when you have that level of realism and authenticity, then I think customer responds better, right? So in this case, with developers not sharing about RECs, about the value they may have in the future, I'd like to use this as a call to action to the industries and developers. Let us share this knowledge with the market, with the customers. And while we may not put it into the financial model today as a
Yeah,
kind of bankable line of income, certainly the upside possibility over time is very clear, and it's there, right? And on that same note, Alan, I mean, you've been kind enough to share the kind of nascent structure and the lack of regulation. But let me ask you personally, being active in Myanmar, in the Indochina region, What is your personal view of RECs or carbon credits coming into the economic or regulatory landscape in the coming years? Is it going to happen? Is it going to nobody cares, or is it actually a possibility?
It's hard for me to say from outside of the Myanmar market, but I would just based on the how dynamic a lot of the other places are, right? Like the Philippines or I mean, Vietnam is a bit on pause now, but they prove themselves to be quite dynamic. I suspect that it can happen in other countries. In Myanmar, it won't happen for 10 years. People they struggle with the basic ideas around solar as it is. So the idea of a credit and I mean no normal factory owner in Myanmar. Okay, there's a few MNCs who of course will understand and they'll have their own PPA if they do if they do a lease model or do if they get some sort of financing but that will come from their regional or global headquarters and that will say whatever their policy is about RECs or credits in that sense. So
Interesting.
yeah, I think it'll be quite there'll be no impact in the short term, in medium
I
term.
see. And Thomas, just to get your views on that as well from a Vietnam perspective, how much do you see the impact on a kind of financial model or a bankability perspective or an economic impact over the coming years of RECs?
Because we have such a massive oversupply of renewable energy here from hydro, solar, and wind, uh, a REC is always going to be near free of charge in Vietnam. It's the admin
Makes
costs
sense.
of it. I think they're currently trading at 65 cents, so a Sing dollar, give or take,
Wow.
not
So
30 Sing dollar.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, I think what I've personally derived from your views, gentlemen, is that it is a localized or at least national game, dependent very much on the local supply and demand scenario of RE vis-a-vis corporate demand. And clearly, the introduction of some kind of cross-border rec trading uh, is something, for example, a pain point or rather an opportunity that Vasilios you've spotted in the Philippines. So let me now bring it back to you, Vasilios, having heard from the participants, and of course your own knowledge and experience in the Philippines. And this will kind of wrap it up in these last 2 minutes. But I'd like to know, based on everything that you've heard, what do you feel will be the opportunities and or challenges in the Philippines market when it comes to using RECs to improve profitability or the lucrative nature of our business?
I think at the end of the day, it all boils down to the price for those certificates, right? So if, for example, the demand is low, we will end up having low prices for the REC certificates and having less incentives to actually pursue to develop them and obtain them and sell them on the market. Once the prices go up due to higher demand, of course, that would make things a little bit more interesting. And I think, I mean, I agree with the other speakers. It is a kind of political discussion there, whether to do it domestically or internationally with a cross-border sale. I think it does offer a lot of additional opportunities once cross-border sales would be implemented. Of course, it would have some sort of regulations, requirements to make sure that the prices would not skyrocket and leave the complete domestic market run dry, because that would also be, of course, very, very unfair to the local businesses. So
Yeah, that's the
there need to
shadow of
be,
that. Yeah,
yeah,
sure,
it
sure.
has its pros and cons, right? And it's
Yeah.
up to the regulators to tackle this. I mean, we won't be able to find a solution here today with us amongst each other. But I think from my take is we need to decarbonize no matter what. And whether I take off 1 ton of carbon dioxide in the Philippines or 1 ton of carbon dioxide in France or Britain or wherever, it shouldn't make a big difference. It's one atmosphere that we are looking into. And if we find ways to keep that in a healthy way without putting low income countries into jeopardy, it is a very good opportunity to look into. Definitely in its infancy as of now, also from what I've heard from the other panelists. That's my take. And within the Philippines itself, I think the local market is making some progress there. Eventually, it will boil down to how like strict the government will be laying out the decarbonization rules. Like when will we implement any kind of share? Like how much renewable should there be by which year? I have yet to find any official numbers when the Philippines will be carbon neutral. So that is our biggest challenge here, as I see it.
Yeah. Really well said, Vasilios. This is really nice kind of closing, actually. I like the concept of one atmosphere. I think we all get so siloed in our markets and business, we kind of forget that we do share this thing called the planet and the sun and the sunlight that belongs to all of us. But I guess the harsh reality of the world is different. I'm an idealist myself, but I've become a lot more practical in life. But I love that key message about one atmosphere. So I want to thank all of you, gentlemen. It's been a lovely panel. I've really enjoyed kind of moderating and learning from all of you. So I would like to extend my personal thanks to yourselves as well as to Priyanshi and the organizers at Solar Quarter, and of course the attendees. I hope you've enjoyed it, and thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much, all
Thank
the
you. Thank you.
panelists and the attendees as well. And Sam, sir, you were absolutely outstanding. Thank you so much for a terrific
Thank
and
you.
very professional example you set as a moderator. It was a pleasure
Thank
having
you.
you all in this panel. And see you tomorrow for another exciting session. Till then, bye from my end and take care.
Yeah. Priyanshi, just a quick one
Bye
before
bye.
we go. Can we circulate all the contacts of everybody with all the attendees? Will you follow up with that so everybody can get in touch with panelists individually?
Yeah, sure. I'll put it in the
Wonderful.
chat box. Yeah.
Please do so. Wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Have a
you
good
all.
Bye
week.
Take care.
and
Thank you.
take
Bye
care.
bye.
Sunny
Bye.
regards. Bye bye.
Bye.